The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, midweek editions here. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and you. We are loaded up, plenty to get into when it comes to what could have been for Nebraska basketball in Iowa City. Get for the Nebraska football squad out of the portal all the way from Roll Tide country. It's officially official, and we'll check in. Mike Babcock going to be with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Evan Bland, not only on the Elijah Pritchett news, but also Nebraska still trying to make their way with some more additions on the offensive line and different parts of the squad. You're welcome to be a part of things with us. 489-1240, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. Can dial up the show that way. Can jump in the stream if you like. Hail Varsity YouTube, where you like and subscribe. Hopefully, tell a friend about us. Watch the show that way. Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. And can email Chris at hailvarsity.com. We'll have a Jock Doc. What will and can knock down that potential NFL draft grade? Well, it's injuries and what positions can suffer some of the most. We'll check in with Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center, before we are all said and done. Elijah, you and I were exchanging texts last night. I think that started around halftime, and we watched Nebraska unable to close the deal at Iowa City. A lot to get into there, a lot of hand-wringing and frustration, and a lot of ire directed first and foremost at the officials, a lot of ire directed at Nebraska not doing some of the simple that they've been doing a lot of this season, at least at Pinnacle Bank Arena. And it's one that stings because it's one of the few that feels like you had in your back pocket on the road in conference play. Is not easy, and it's not easy this year. And you let one slip away if you're Nebraska basketball. I don't think it's not a damaging loss yet, but it is a bad loss. It's a bad loss in the sense that you had it and you couldn't close it. It's one you're going to kick yourself about potentially. Maybe not going to keep you out of the tournament, but it could come back to bite you, and it could turn into that too.
Well, and it's the fact that the way you had Iowa right where you wanted them, where you weathered that storm early, which I predicted. Like, Iowa came out, they threw the first punch. Nebraska responded really well.
You absorbed it. You were ready to fight them and win.
Yes. Yeah, you had that counter punch. You take the big lead. I left here from work at the under 16 media timeout in the second half when Nebraska has a 15-point lead. And by the time I get back home, that lead has already been whittled down to, I think, 5 or 3 at that point.
It just kept going down 9, 7,
and so
1.
I was watching in here, listening, and then I get back home and watch the end of that game, and the body language flipped from those two teams, where Iowa looked dejected. By the end of regulation, Nebraska looked dejected. You're not able to hit your free throws. You're not able to finally land that kill shot whenever you had Iowa against the ropes, whenever you had your foot on their throat. You're not able to land the kill shot. Iowa, it's what they do at Carver Hawkeye. They started knocking down their threes. The M word, momentum flips, and Nebraska was lucky to even send that thing to overtime, but then overtime was just extra gross.
It was. It felt like a football overtime, right? I mean,
it felt like a Husker football performance, did it not? Where, like, yeah, you have the lead in the second half, and then, no, here comes the foot off the gas, and here comes the other team sneaking back into it. No, it's going to be a one-score game, and oh, dear God, here comes overtime.
It was just ugly. It was just absolutely ugly. And Dix go nuts in the first half for his scoring. He finished with 30.
And what's up with that? Why does every time Nebraska go on the road, some random role player goes off for a career high? That was a career high for Dix last night.
Sure, and you've got to account for some gangly, goofy dude for Iowa catching and shooting and turning into Craig Hodges at the three-point contest. Sorry, late Bulls reference there. I will quit coughing at some point in my life. Forgive me there. But no, it was just ugly, and Nebraska forgot to defend. That's what's made their money for them. They've been a great defensive team. Nebraska, too many misses in the paint. Nebraska just brutal from the free throw line, 12 of 22. You hit any of the free throws in regulation, game's over.
You left 10 points at the line.
Bryce Williams, his heroics to hit that shot at the buzzer to force overtime. And I thought, okay, they survived the officials. They survived themselves. They survived Iowa's three-point shooting. And they're going to go figure it out in overtime. And then the opposite happened. My biggest problem, if I'm going to rank in order, and you can ask and answer, ask yourself what ticked you off most last night about the loss. Maybe officials are number one for you. Maybe free throws are number one for you. Maybe missing in the paint is number one for you. Or the defensive problems Nebraska had in transition. I'm going to go body language, okay? And I didn't love the body language from Bryce Williams, where he maybe did get knocked down. It wasn't a flop, so to say. He got bumper card towards the end of regulation. There's a steal. There's no double dribble call. And he just kind of laid there. And I'm not in that moment. I am not even a smidgen to his amazing ability. So this isn't loser radio guy calling out athlete. I'm just saying the body language in general from your two leaders last night was not good when you weren't getting the call. And at some point, don't you just accept that it's going to be bad against you in the Big Ten on the road?
On the road, there it is. Because the same thing happened.
You're not going to get any calls.
And the same thing happened on the road at Sparty, where I do think Nebraska's response was somewhat better last night in Iowa City than it was out in
But
East
eventually
Lansing.
they got wore down by the lack of whistles.
Whereas, it was similar where the calls weren't going your way, the other team comes out and punches you in the mouth. Like, that's what happened in East Lansing as well. Nebraska rolled over in East Lansing. They didn't roll over last night, but
they kept swinging.
But as those calls accumulated, and again, I'm not blaming the refs for the loss last night because
they were bad, and you knew they were going to be bad.
Exactly, and you still had every position. You still had yourself in position to go win that basketball game late. What killed you was, when the momentum flipped and it felt like things weren't going your way. You're right. This team, they didn't have that killer mentality that you need in that moment where you can say, we can rise above all of these things.
And listen, in their defense, there are some things you can't rise above. If the guy doesn't make a double dribble call, you can't make that call for him.
Well, don't turn the ball over.
No, amen. Don't dribble into a double team and then.
I know he lost the footing, but you dribbled into the double team.
I mean, and there are things where you get bumped out of bounds. That's a turnover where you get the old giddy up, right? The knee to the back of the leg, and you're helped to score it out of bounds. Gary's a big dude, and he drove into a cinder block that was about 7 feet, and that is footage that needs to be shown of this is what a flop isn't. Where you run into a brick wall and get knocked down and then need chiropractic care afterwards.
Well, a moving brick wall. That's one thing you have to know.
That's it. And then even Hummel's like, I think that's a block.
Oh, you should have heard Muehlheisen on the radio call.
I need to call old Jake and say, how did you and, Scott Docterman, friend of the show with The Athletic, was tweeting last night. And he's like, and maybe you saw the tweet. I retweeted it, but he's like, I don't know how Fred's in the game. Like and this is a national media guy for a lot of years that says I have seen some home cooking before, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, But this is as bad as Scott Docterman has seen. I did not get to see the game because it was not on TV. But there was a game that ticked off Nebraska and kind of helped fuel their 94 Big 8 tournament run. That game was the final regular season game at the Hearn Center in Missouri, where Nebraska just absolutely got robbed. And I still remember to this day being a kid in junior high listening to it on the radio, and Kent's doing the game, and Nebraska got royally hosed. Like, a game was stolen on the road at Missouri, and they never forgot, right? And then they helped fuel them to get a rematch against Missouri in the Big 8 tournament. But it was so bad where you had a couple of the officials looking at one another uncertain of if they should make the call or not. That's the body language from the refs. But your two big dogs need to be better body language. Your big dog and Gary can't go 5 of 21. Dude, I love him. He is the barometer for me. If he plays well, Nebraska wins. I love his heart and soul. But the guy just didn't have it offensively. And at some point, instead of trying to finish with a layup, just go in and force the whistle. Force the whistle, get to the rim, attack the rim. And Nebraska didn't do that. Guys got out of character. Sammy Hoiberg was a little out of character with trying to do too much. And Asijan needs to find his shot because maybe he'll get back here against Purdue. But just a tough one for Nebraska last night when they had it, couldn't finish it.
And the final thing I'll say here with this basketball game is it's only one basketball game. It's only one conference game. That one feels extra gross because of the way you had it in your hands and you let it slip away. But just you're going to have plenty more road games to go and win, winnable games. I mean, Iowa, Carver Hawkeye has always been a tough place for Nebraska to go and play.
And it will be for other teams.
And that's what makes it feel gross is you're like, man, it's so hard to go be in a position to win a basketball game at Carver Hawkeye the way you let it slip away. But you have to remember it's a similar feel to like Kinnick at night or like a whiteout at Penn State where it's tough to go win a game there on the road. Nebraska experienced that last night, the black magic of Carver Hawkeye. That was in full force last night. Now it's about how you respond because you got a big, big test coming up.
You do. We'll dive into some of the portal news. Let's get our shout-outs here. Mike is in. Mike, good to have you. Grateful Red checks in. Our dear friend Connor Clark says 12 of 22 from the free throw line. Hurts my soul. Tough game. But not a backbreaker. He's right.
I agree 100%. Also, you have those cough drops in there? I went through all that work to go find those yesterday.
I think they're...
And now you lost them.
I think they're in my bathroom. Sorry.
Why'd you take them home?
Because I'm scared of you saying, dude, okay, you sound like you're dying on the radio. As much as, your tone may frighten me, I am way more scared of my wife around midnight popping up over the Berlin Wall, which is the body pillow she uses to block her side and my side. She'll pop up and threaten my life 4 times a night because of my snoring. If I'm coughing and I'm snoring, you may not see me on the radio ever again.
Grab like a handful. Grab a handful from the back.
So I can either choke on them at night or she finally gets a hold of a hammer and uses it. Grateful Red says Iowa has bad basketballs. Anonymous weighs in regarding the officiating at Iowa City. I haven't seen anything that suspicious since the Lee Harvey Oswald prison transfer. Oh, Mr. Jack Rubin.
I just watched a great documentary on Lee Harvey Oswald and why the conspiracy theories probably don't hold any weight. I recommend it to anybody out there if you want.
Yeah, the other Dave.
Long-form documentary. Schmidt doesn't want to dive into it.
We'll get there at some point.
No, we won't.
The other Dave says we got Pritchett. Bama's offensive tackle is in, now a Husker. Let's get the New Mexico State guy. He is Pete is his name, and Pete might be a Husker too. We'll wait and see. I know Vandy was chasing him with lots of coin. Jeff is back. Good to have you, Jeff. Justin is here. Justin, good to spend time with you in the stream. Great Red Shark here, hiding out from the flames. Great Red Shark out on the West Coast. Be safe, dude. Uncle Larry's here. How many packs a day do I smoke? That from Ed Foley. Ed, I don't smoke. I actually feel pretty good. It doesn't sound like it. But, yeah, the final remnants of this coal I was jacking with. Captain says, I need a strong shot of liquor. Will take care of that cough. I got another leader, Captain, of it. Kobe is here. Kobe, good to have you in. Scott is here. Wrestling Oranges checks in again. Tim out in Idaho says, getting to where I really don't like Iowa. QB1 Ace in from Arkansas. And he's like, hey, got another Elijah today. Who's on the horn?
We have Stephen Lincoln.
Steve, thanks for calling. Thanks for hanging.
No Steve, I guess.
Apparently not. He's probably been on hold for 15 minutes because I just wouldn't shut up or quit coughing. Steve, thanks for trying anyway.
Give us a call back later.
KG says now Schmidt has a Nebraska hoodie on after he turned his back on us yesterday and joined the Pac-12. Yesterday's zip-up was from the Pirate. Got to wear that once in a while. This is from Junior, so away we go. Mike Babcock going to be with us. We'll talk hoops and some football. Hail Varsity with you on a midweek edition.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity with you on a Wednesday. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Ace, QB1 Ace says, I'm coughing till the coffin. Appreciate it. Funky Giblet says, I'm on the winter cold struggle bus. And the real Matthew says, a CPAP will change your life, Chris. I did get tested for that, and I guess I don't stop breathing enough to warrant any assistance financially for a CPAP.
You don't stop breathing enough.
Well, that's what I was told. Mike Babcock is wondering if I'll make it through this segment or not. Babbers, good to have you, bud. Happy New Year.
And Mike is muted, Babbers.
Yep, Babbers, you're muted.
Oh, see, it's fun whenever you can say Mike is muted.
Uh-huh.
It's like that, yeah.
Whenever I have it muted is when I say things of substance, and then I remember to do it, and then all of a sudden I start saying things that don't make any sense.
Oh, you'll make lots of sense. What do you circle as most frustrating about last night? Nebraska, Iowa shooting, or the Zebras for basketball?
Well, as I'm watching the game, I'm getting frustrated with the officials, but that's not why. Nebraska didn't lose the game because of the officials. I mean, when you have a 15-point lead and you can't hold on to it, it's not the officials can make some bad calls, but they can't make enough calls to blow that lead. And I think the most frustrating thing was for me, because Nebraska's aggressive on defense. I think that's positive. But it seemed like whenever they would go to double team the ball, somebody would be left open for Iowa, and next thing you know, there's a basket for Iowa, and the lead is diminishing, and then we can be frustrated by a double dribble and all this sort of thing, but that's not what put Nebraska in that position, and that's the thing, I guess, it's on the Huskers in that sense, and it's frustrating because you had a win at Iowa. You could have had a road win. They're tough to come by in the Big Ten, but you could have had one there. You should have had one there, and you didn't get the job done. And as one of the listeners pointed out, the frustrating. I think Connor Clark said frustrating. The free throw shooting. You got to shoot free throws better than that. You just do a little bit better on the free throw shooting, and you've got the win. And, that's on you. That's your responsibility. And at that point, until the overtime, Nebraska had an advantage in the number of free throws shot. So take advantage of it. And then you get into the overtime, of course, and they're shooting a lot of free throws and they're hitting them. And, just very frustrating. And for a guy to go off on you for 30 points in one half and an overtime, that shouldn't happen. But again, it was like in some instances he's left open because they go to double team somebody and then he's open and he's hitting three-point shots, and it's ridiculous.
it almost feels like Nebraska's attention, I mean, it did, but you don't expect their attention to detail or their focus, right? Free throws, focus, and then picking somebody up and getting in someone's back pocket that's on the heater that they're on. Sanford, Nebraska could control both those things, and they didn't adjust to it.
Yeah, well, and, Sanford can get his 30 points, but then Dix gets 31.
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere here, you got to get a happy medium. And, one gets 31 and the other doesn't get 30. That's, you've got to figure some way to do that. And defensively, Nebraska has shown the ability to do those things. That was the thing, I guess, again, that was frustrating to me is that Nebraska defensively has shown that it can get the job done. That's one of the things that it looked like maybe that was what it was going to be. The defense was going to determine that game, and Iowa, which had been scoring 100 points a game, wasn't going to get even close. And then the next thing you know, in overtime, they got 97.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, let me get your thoughts on, in terms of frustration level, were you more frustrated after Nebraska's loss at Iowa in football or in basketball? Because in both cases, they were in position to win and let it slip away. Which loss is more frustrating in your eyes?
Yes, both of them.
I can't differentiate if I'm a Nebraska. I mean, it's got to be football. It's got to be football. As bad as basketball was, listen, that's happened before.
You have more... You have more confidence in basketball to get things right? Is that what you're saying here?
No, that's a really good question. Is it football or basketball for you with the Iowa stabbing? Football still, I just still blink. As well as the defense plays, the fact that they had 0 third down conversions. 0 for 10 with that quarterback.
Well, it was essentially 2 plays.
I know.
You could argue a third with that muff pump, but it was really the touchdown run and the strip sack.
Right.
Cost you the game.
I mean, that is, and then the guy snuck one out through the upright in that weather trying to kick a football.
See, the football loss may have been more unbelievable, but the basketball loss may have been more frustrating.
Yeah, because you had him. You had him ready to stop breathing in basketball.
Close enough where I was willing to leave work and just go flip it on the radio because, my God, 15-point lead, they got it. You never felt that confident with the football game, so maybe that's why. More disappointing there, but not as frustrating.
That totally does qualify as a bad beat if you're a wagerer or two because you were winning outright, you had the cover, and then you didn't because you lost in overtime. Mike,
well, I think, talk about the officials, there's one right there that they did actually give Nebraska an opportunity to send that thing into overtime because you could have called. Because
they didn't call another foul.
Yeah, they didn't in that situation.
They didn't do their job again.
Bryce Williams was able to get off the 3-point shot. So, it wasn't totally. It wasn't all one-sided. Although, from my point of view, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at how Nebraska's getting jobbed by the officials, and it's really it's frustrating when you see a guy get knocked down and the defender is moving. He's not set.
Yeah,
and there's no foul called. That's
called a blindside block on the football.
That's called assault,
brother. I love it, Mike.
But again, that's not why they lost. That's they could take care of it. There had to be accountability there.
I want to get your thoughts, Mike, on the football portal. We'll dive into this here in a little bit as well. But Nebraska able to get Elijah Pritchett, top 40 offensive lineman at one time. You get him from Alabama, and it's a high-profile get as well with a lot of upside. And there's, some reality that Nebraska has some of the young guys that may not be ready yet. This guy's played a lot of football, and you get 2 years with him.
Yeah, I think that was good. And as somebody said, called in or whatever, if they get Pete, that would be good too. Mm-hmm. You said that Vanderbilt's pushing hard too there. But you could use a couple of tackles like that. Certainly getting Pickett is going to help. You just don't know what Teddy Prohaska, he's had injury problems. Gunnar Gatula played some. I think they would have preferred maybe to ease him into it a little bit more, but he's stepped up when he had to. So that's really important. I mean, a lot of times the more high profile guys are the ones that, play quarterback or they, wide receiver, running back, whatever. But offensive line is really important. You got to start there, and Nebraska needs to develop that offensive line. Have some pieces there, but you got to get some more.
In your opinion, Mike, was Nebraska's offensive line in 2024 good enough?
I think it was pretty good. I don't want to go overboard with it, but I think it was pretty good. Although there were some instances where Dylan Raiola was having a hard time keeping himself upright because of the pressure that was being put on him. But I think the offensive line got better, and I think that it was I think it was good enough. It wasn't like pipeline number 3 or whatever, kind of good, but it was pretty good.
I love that question, and I think it was good enough. I think you had a combination of the quarterback running into some sacks from time to time or holding on to the football too long. Rarely was there 1, 2, 3, okay, the quarterback's been destroyed by the offensive line. And quite honestly, until you had the Dana change, you really didn't, I don't think, give the run game enough of a go at times. Or if it wasn't great early, you weren't confident in going back to it. So I think the offensive line, the way they moved the line of scrimmage, Mike, and you had the run game be a thing and complement the offense, complement the passing game. I think the offensive line did a pretty good job this year.
I'm with you. Like, if I'm giving them a grade, we're in the B category with the offensive line. Good enough to win a national title? No. Good enough to reach your goals this season? Yes. You do wonder what the offensive line looks like with a running back that
helps the offensive line.
Yeah, I was trying to find the right way to put that nicely. Yeah, a running back that helps and complements what your offensive line is.
It's a real thing.
There. Yeah,
for sure. Babbers, what say you moving forward here with Nebraska and the football prospects? Do you feel good that Nebraska finally got an offensive lineman? Do you think they're done with their additions? And what do you believe about this staff can be right with the combo here, the blend of portal and high school here moving forward? We got about a minute.
In this day and age, I don't think Nebraska's done. I don't think you're ever done. I think you can't be. If you want to be successful, you can't ever say that you're done. And I think that the portal becomes more important because I think you have to have guys that can play right away. I mean, it's really difficult. You get some good recruits and you want to develop them, but they come in thinking they want to play too. I think you've got to get guys that have the ability to step on the field and play right away.
No, there's no more, unfortunately, waiting till someone's ready. If they're not ready, you get somebody who is ready. Love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Only 3 coughs, that segment. I love it. At MD Babs on Twitter. It's where you find him. Babbers, we appreciate you greatly, bud. Good stuff today, and we'll holler again soon. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
There he is, Mike Babcock with us here. We'll check in open phones for you here till 5. Evan Bland on the way next hour.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, NASCAR Eric has checked in. Good to have you. Scott is here. Steve is here. The other Elijah checks in. 489-1240, 800-825-5865. You really picked an old hand grenade pin when you asked Babbers that question about football or basketball loss in Iowa City. What was worse? And right now, I think based on our stream friends, Hail Varsity YouTube, they're still leaning football because it's something that shall never be spoken of, shall never be forgotten. The hoops is, people like their basketball program. People love Fred. And, you've just seen enough bad moments. And this isn't Fred's fault or baggage, but it's just Nebraska basketball. I mean, you just kind of expect bad to happen. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you're completely there yet, or maybe you are for football.
And there isn't a long history of this Husker basketball team blowing leads both at home and on the road.
Last night was out of character for them.
I'm not sure I call it out of character, but they don't have the same character as Husker football. Because the blowing the lead aspect of things was a lot of character. Based on what I've seen so far this season.
You're waiting on something bad for football, or something bad for football was going to happen versus maybe it'll happen for basketball?
Yeah, but basketball, you do have the history of, like, as I talked about earlier, some role player going off for a career high whenever you're on the road. You go on a scoring drought on the road. The body language doesn't always look great whenever you're on the road. Like, those are the types of things that you've come to expect. I don't think you've come to expect blowing a 15-point lead in the second half.
You don't expect them to get up 15.
Yeah, but you do expect the Husker football team to blow it.
Find a way.
Yeah,
and I think
find a way in a bad way.
And I think that could shift. I think that may shift. Excuse me. I think that may shift moving forward, and we'll see. Interesting here. With the Chicago Bears opening, you have some reports by On3 that Matt Campbell may be interviewing for the Chicago Bears opening. Wow. I don't know that I don't know that I'd stay in college football any longer with this being the wild, wild west, and Iowa State and Campbell have done a good job, but it isn't. Hell, it's not even Vanderbilt with Vandy throwing high six figures at an offensive tackle trying to compete for Nebraska and Shiera Pete, we're talking about from New Mexico State. Do you go to the NFL? And I think that's the new thing. If you're a college football coach, you're just tired of what college football's become. Some of you. And I get it. Go off to the NFL. They did try and knock on Marcus Freeman's door a while back, which was the right phone call to make.
His team loves him. Notre Dame.
No, I know, and he likes them.
He loves Notre Dame, but that's an important quality to have, I think, in the NFL. But you talk about, did you hear Justin Herbert's quote about why he knew Harbaugh was different whenever he came to L.A.? You hear that quote where Herbert was talking about the fact that, it was the first coach I've ever had that remembered my birthday and said happy birthday to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Little thing like that.
But a little thing like that, like you caring about your team and your team caring about you.
Sure.
It's not the be-all, end-all, especially in a place like the NFL.
It's a little thing, but it's personal. Mm-hmm. It has impact.
And Freeman strikes me as a similar type of guy that would know that. And I'd say the same about Matt Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Same. I think Rule's got that too. I mean, I think there's a genuine connection with his guys. And when we were talking with Amir Abdullah, that's something that he noticed right off the bat with position groups going over to Rule's house in Charlotte. He wanted to have dudes over for dinner. Get to know him on a personal level, not just this cold corporate, hey, you're one of my 53 and I'm going to fire you tomorrow if you fumble a ball. That is the NFL. So, who's on the horn?
Steve and Lincoln.
Steve, go for it.
Hello, Chris and Elijah. Sorry about my phone malfunctioning, but all is well. I want to go ahead and say once again, your radio program, Hail Varsity, is indeed number one. And I know you got a lot on your plate. I want to know, Chris, hypothetically, if you could have spoke right before that overtime period in Iowa-Nebraska men's basketball, what would have you told our Nebraska men's Cornhusker basketball team before they took Iowa on in that overtime? I'm all ears.
All right, thank you. Block out the officiating. Easier said than done. Give me some body language. Go make more plays. Hit your free throws. Guard those two goofy goofballs behind the three-point arc. face guard them, throw them in the fourth row, do something other than what was done. That's it. Because that's like, it was a bad movie over and over and over and over again where no one picks up Seifert and catch, fire, three, boom. There was some contested shots, but for the most part, it was just not finding the guy.
I mean, and you had the...
And that's not like...
It felt like you had the
Nebraska.
game plan right on Seifert for 25 minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
And then he just goes and reels off shot after shot.
You know what
after
really
shot.
ticked me off last night was the fact he was able to ask the referee, you know, this was an out-of-bounds play. There was no angle for it. But Seifert was trying to get get the possession. The possession stuck with Nebraska, and it should have. But he went to the ref, pointed, and had that kind of goofy grin, right? And he was,
Give the review motion.
The review motion. And he got it. It's like he's telling the refs what to do. How about you shut up and go play defense? I mean, he just there's certain players that just wear you out, rub you wrong, and I got my full fan beady on right now. I'm going to that mode of Nebraska. Usually I don't care. I just want to talk about it. But it can, Nebraska basketball can tick you off. I mean, as much fun as it is when they're winning and you cheer them on and you show up to PBA, it's rocking. They can rip your soul out in a loss like that. And then you've got one of the characters being this little goon that's 6'8", and then he dunks. He went down Broadway on you with a left-handed slam job, and he couldn't miss. And the other part is he went kickstand on you, right? He stuck his leg out, drew a 3 free throw foul,
That was bad.
which was crap. And he pretty much nudged Dennis Rodman style. One of your power forwards out of bounds, didn't get whistled. And he just has this bleep-eating grin on his face the entire time, and you can't do anything about it because you didn't shut him down.
That being said, as demoralized as we have sounded this hour with the Husker basketball loss, I don't think that same energy is present in the team right now. I don't think they're as demoralized. They got to be disappointed, but I think they understand that what they put out there for the final 15 minutes of that game is not who they are.
They have responded this season appropriately.
Yes.
They responded after St. Mary's. They responded after Michigan State.
Going back to last year, I know it's a different team, but there's a lot of the same guys. They responded well last season whenever things went poorly. They tended to come back and put together a good performance after an embarrassing one. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes against Purdue. That's the next big question is how do they respond?
Mike is telling me to have 2 shots of Polish brandy and 2 sets of the sweats, and I'll wake up, the cold will be gone. I will hit the steam room later. I'm not sure what Polish brandy is.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
So I'm intrigued by this Polish brandy. Coach Brandon's hilarious. Says Sanford's dad is paying the Big Ten for minutes. That's hilarious.
Seifert, he's got the crazy eyes.
He's got like who's the kid in The Simpsons that goes ha ha, that character? Is it Nelson?
I must not watch enough of The Simpsons.
That's okay, but he has that kind of grin.
Yeah,
the super toothy Family Guy, over exaggerated 70 set of teeth.
No, he's just the guy that in rec league basketball, whenever he matches up against you, you go, "Oh man, this is not good for me." Things might get weird. You don't like it. I don't know. There's something about his eyes and his smile that are just generally unsettling.
Receding hairline at the age of 19, and some of us fought that fight. I have not, so I'm not judging if you've fought the wrong fight of a receding hairline in your teens or early 20s. And he's probably just a wannabe Larry Bird trash talker too. He probably just whispers it to you or bodies you up or has got zero bubble respect.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Right?
It's like the rec league basketball where things might get weird. Yeah,
he's like Coach Durkin, the guy who got popped at Maryland. Mm-hmm. There's 75 urinals at the Big Ten media days, and he wanders up next to you. Hey, bud, how you doing?
Just the close talker.
The close talker.
The kind of guy that gets
17 urinals in a Chicago luxury hotel, and here's Coach Durkin. You like the Terps, son? Like, dude, it's kind of like the guys sitting together at the movies. There's a space between, seat-wise.
Yes. Oh, if possible.
If possible.
If possible. There's
If
some big
possible.
When I went and saw Lord of the Rings extended editions in theaters over the summer,
There were lots of spaces.
No, there wasn't an empty seat in the house. They had to open a second showing because it was so popular, Schmitty. Yeah, how about that for your hatred, huh? Hating on Lord of the Rings, and then facts got you.
Ed Foley again chimes in on the stream. It's nice that Ed listens to the show and has for the last month. Polish Brandy is a fine lady. She services the area in Lincoln, Chris. That's nice. I'm not going to ask what she does, but have you? I'm going to Google this right now. Sound like an old bastard here. Forgive me. I'm going to Google this right now. What is Polish brandy? I've heard of the hot toddy, right? That's just you put the little honey in the bourbon and you heat it up
with some lemon juice too.
With the lemon juice.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's the only thing I ever look forward to whenever I have a cold. The 10 minutes of like a spicy soup and a hot toddy gives you 15 minutes.
I might have
of
to go
respite.
hot and sour tonight. Might have to do that. I need to learn to make my own, but the go-to spot's pretty solid for it. I don't feel bad. Just can't talk and breathe at the same time without hacking away. Elijah is going to sneak up during the commercial break with a tire iron and put me out of my misery, I think. There we go. No smoking. Okay. Supernovas going on here Friday, the season opener happening the 10th of January. And be a part of Nova's Nation. Be a part of history at CHI as the Atlanta Vibe are here to start off the season. But see that championship banner raised up, world-class talent, Olympians, NCAA champs, and, of course, the local superstars for you. Log on today, supernovas.com.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Thanks for hanging out. As we have Mike checking in with what the Polish brandy is, and it's Farmer's Cough Syrup. I was able to look it up. I will check that out. I will make sure I bring my cough drops with me and get more cough drops for home and away. How's that sound, Elijah?
Sounds like a plan.
Home venue, road venue. I am hammer and water. I'm all right. Nebraska continues to hit the portal.
You know what you could do? Fanny pack full of cough drops.
I don't have a fanny pack.
Get one. I'll loan you one.
No, I don't. I'm anti-fanny pack. Dr. Rob Zadiska. He's the only dude that I think can you're not going to mess with him wearing a fanny pack.
Well, who are you trying to impress with a fanny pack? It don't matter.
I mean, it's over for me. Married with child.
You said it. I didn't say
Pushing
it.
50.
All I'm saying.
Evan Bland right now is like...
it's utilitarian. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Evan, yes or no on the fanny pack?
The last fanny pack I owned was as a child of the 90s. I had a Game Boy fanny pack where you could put the individual game cartridges in these little flaps. And so, I think the last time I used that thing was for sunscreen at a local pool in high school. Wow. So that's the last time I've gone with it. I can appreciate its practical value, but the hit that you take from a fashion perspective might outweigh that. I think that's a good debate to have.
But Schmidt, think about it this way:
Can you wear it like it's almost a satchel? Kind of crossing left shoulder to right shoulder.
You can, but don't try to make it look. I mean, that's what the kids are doing now.
No, I know, but that's even worse. Old guy with fanny pack wearing it like I'm
19 years
I'm a
old.
former Nebraska linebacker.
No, but think about it this way, Schmitty, from a utilitarian point of view. cough drops in there. Your water bottles. You always got water bottles. Get one
It's
with
vodka. Let's not lie to anyone anymore.
just a bottle. A place where you can keep your bottle. Golf balls, because we know how many golf balls you lose. It'd be nice that you don't have to go back to the cart. You can just take one out of the fanny pack.
You have pockets.
It's handy, but at the same time, you might start putting too much stuff in there. You're gonna go about life and be like, I don't need that fourth golf ball in there right now. I don't need that third pen or that second set of AA batteries. Like, at some point,
Elijah,
you got to declutter.
Do you need that extra lighter in there, Elijah? With your hacky sack? I'm sorry. You had a fanny pack at Southeast when I went there. You were a dirty hippie, and you were out to the hill.
The hacky sack's a great call. The hacky sack fits right in there. It's moldable. I mean, you could pack a few of those in there. You got to have your emergency hacky sack.
Yeah, you do.
In my era of high school, if you had a fanny pack, you weren't a stoner. You're just a loser.
Yes. Let's get on to football. God love it. You have Elijah Pritchett, Evan, that is now in. What's your take and what's your make here of Nebraska getting a prospect of this ilk, or do you even look at where the dude's coming from? I can't separate. I mean, I see Nebraska gets a kid from Georgia, gets a kid from Oregon, gets a kid from Alabama. They're supposed to be good, right? They're going to be good, right? I mean, that's the mistake.
Well, I think history would say that just because a guy transfers from a top school like that certainly does not mean they're going to be, producers at Nebraska. I mean, you could name all those schools. Alabama has had guys come to Nebraska that have done nothing. Ohio State, Georgia. I mean, you can go down that list. And they've had a few that have hit too. I mean, MJ Sherman was an example from Georgia recently who came over and made an impact. And so, Pritchett, I think he is kind of what you want to make him out to be. Like, if you want to point to the recruiting pedigree and say, hey, he was a 5-star by a couple recruiting sites and had offers nationwide from pretty much everybody. And hey, if he develops a little bit more at Nebraska, if he could take off. Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument. You could also make the argument that in a tour of duty this season at USC, I mean, he gave up by far the most quarterback pressures and sacks of anybody who was a regular on that line. So, I think you have to acknowledge certainly Nebraska needed or felt like it needed another offensive tackle to be in the mix. They missed out on some other high-profile candidates in the portal in December. So there was a sense of urgency there. I think you have to at least be impressed with the speed by which Nebraska's coaching staff turned that around. I mean, Pritchett only entered the portal earlier this week, and now he comes on a visit. Nebraska makes sure he doesn't go anywhere else and locks him down. So you have to appreciate that. But I don't know. I guess I'm in the boat that says I'm not going to play this up as, hey, this is a clear solution for Nebraska at right tackle for the next 2 years. I don't want to minimize it either, because he has now some experience in the SEC facing top pass rushers in college football, and now he comes to Nebraska armed with that experience. You listen to some of the talk out of Alabama this season. He was a guy who earned that job as the season went on and showed some improvement late in the year. So I think maybe the tiebreaker for me is that he's got multiple years of eligibility, and this is someone who can be in the mix for Nebraska for 2 years and is not necessarily a 1-year fix. So certainly, by a lot of accounts, has some improvement to do, probably on and off the field, but there's no doubt the potential is there. And if Nebraska can unlock something in him, whether through coaches or style of offense, he certainly has the talent and the makeup to lock down that position into the future.
Evan, with all the freshmen and redshirt freshmen that Nebraska had along their offensive line this past season, feels like a guy that Nebraska needs to get right, the evaluation. Yeah, it feels like you need to be right with this one and have a starter for the next year or two. And if you don't, how big of a problem do you think it is for Nebraska? Say Pritchett isn't the guy, he doesn't take the strides that you expect him to, and he's not that clear-cut number one right tackle.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're kind of moving toward the professional model now, where it's like, okay, you go out and you sign a guy and you expect him to be the guy, and if that doesn't happen, then not only are you having to turn to somebody else, but you're also out that money that you presumably paid and invested in that person. So yeah, it's important, I think, in a lot of senses, where Nebraska is investing time, money, future hopes in what Pritchett can do. And people got sick, I guess, at times of Bryce Benhart. I thought he got better as his career went on. Mm-hmm. To the point this year, I mean, his name didn't come up that much, and that's at that position. That's a compliment for what he was able to do. So you move on from him. The other tackle spot I think is interesting too. Nebraska may end up adding another tackle out of the portal here this month, but you look at what Gunnar Gatula did. I thought he performed well when he was pressed into duty. And then you've got Teddy Prohaska, who was the preseason starter out there, Turner Corcoran, who could still come back as well. I mean, those two are recovering physically and have decisions to make about their future. So you would imagine Nebraska probably internally has a better sense of what their future is, but I mean, those are the guys that you're starting with before you start turning to some younger guys that you mentioned, some unproven players. They like Grant Bricks long term. I don't know that it's fair to him to put him in that situation right now. So I think you just got to credit Nebraska for going out and addressing a perceived need. And again, they probably wish they had landed Isaiah World in December or a couple of the other targets that they had brought in. But, again, this is a guy who has the potential, who has the experience. And so now you turn to your position coach and Donovan Raiola and Dana Holgerson as the OC and say, hey, here's some pretty talented clay. Let's mold it into something that can be a difference maker. So now I think the onus is on Pritchett to improve and on the coaches to find maybe the best spot for him in 2025.
Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald at Evan Bland, OWH. Follow him on Twitter. Read him, omaha.com. Do you think Pete is also within grasp of Nebraska, the New Mexico State tackle? You got the Montana State kid that's out there. Ideally, what's the offensive line addition number? What do you think that number is, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pete is a logical addition. I mean, you look at what he did at New Mexico State. He was a starting left tackle and pretty effective one there. And so in theory, you could bring in Pritchett and Pete and lock up the corner spots if they come out and prove what they can do. And then you have a little bit more flexibility on the inside. I think Nebraska feels pretty good about its interior blockers. I mean, you still get Justin Evans back next year, and you have some other pieces who have played. Henry Letofsky's been good. They like Sam Sledge and what he has done behind the scenes. That's somebody else who can, maybe make a move into the future. But yeah, I think probably two tackles is what they're looking at. They've got Pritchett now in the mix, and maybe Pete will be that other guy. I'm sure he has other suitors and interested parties out there as well that he'll have to sort through. But, I do think the urgency is there. Nebraska wants these guys on campus for classes and for spring ball. Like of all the positions that you might add late in the spring or in the summer, offensive line is not one that's an easy addition or that you can kind of on board quickly. That usually takes a longer amount of time. So I would imagine that they'll address that need here in the next couple of weeks. Maybe it'll happen quickly with Pete, who's been on campus, I believe, today. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, I think that number to me would probably be two tackles that Nebraska is looking for. Evan
Bland with us. Evan, what's the new normal, in your opinion, for timeline before you I don't want to tell a guy to leave, but you look elsewhere and the 105 is going to be a reality? How long till someone gets processed?
I mean, probably 2 years is going to be kind of that new normal. Roster spots are going to be incredibly valuable. I mean, Nebraska's been used to operating at north of 150 lately, and it really has never been much below 125, even at its smallest. So it's going to be a new situation, and you just can't afford to take on too many developmental or even a ton of redshirted guys. Like, you think back to that 2019 class, they redshirted the vast majority of that group, looking ahead for what it could do. You don't have that luxury now. It's about getting old and staying old, and sure, you'll probably redshirt your linemen on the offensive and defensive sides, but skill position, I mean, you got to probably show something pretty quickly within that first year or two that you have a chance to get on the field, or you as the player will probably want to look elsewhere, and the school will want somebody to be able to push those top guys as well. So, you say new normal, like this is also new right now, where they're working with different roster sizes. We're talking about revenue sharing of $20.5 million per school. That's going to, in all likelihood, take effect this summer. And now even Nebraska, like 2 years ago when Matt Rule came in, the idea was to be primarily a developmental program, and then you supplement through the portal. Well, since that time, they've added roster limitations. The financial landscape has changed, and right now, at this moment, they've signed 20 high school players and 15 portal players, and that second number is going to go up. So it almost feels like this is going to be sort of a 1-to-1 ratio when you talk about high school to portal ads moving forward.
And Evan, you talk about the fact that young guys need to show something within the first 2 years. Based on what you're seeing in the portal, which young guys, whether they've made it through their first year or they're incoming for their first year, do you think Nebraska is bullish on moving forward, just based on where Nebraska is going in the portal?
You're talking about guys who are coming in the portal that'll...
So the guys that are either already on roster or are part of the incoming recruiting class that are getting started here in the spring. But based on where Nebraska has gone in the portal, where do you think they're bullish with what they already have on roster in terms of young guys?
Well, I think, like, probably the position that stands out to me where they haven't been active in the portal is running back. And I think that says a lot about what they believe they have in that room, with Emmett Johnson coming back and, Mekhi Nelson, Quentin Ives, but also Jamarian Parker, maybe Connor Booth. I think that, to me, has been the thing that stood out, where they've stood pat at that particular position. You can kind of go through the other ones. I guess tight end would be another one where they haven't been active at all in terms of bringing in visitors or even signing a lot of high school players. They feel like, Luke Lindenmeyer can be that guy, and what Heinrich Harburg can do, and kind of on down the line. So I think those are probably those spots. But even with the portal, a lot of these guys that they're bringing in aren't seniors or sort of ready-made guys. I mean, they are bringing in a number of players who have 3 or 4 years still left. I mean, Hardley Gilmore, the receiver from Kentucky, that's essentially like signing a high school kid. I mean, he redshirted, he's got potential, et cetera, et cetera. There are a few other guys. I mean, Marcos Davila, the Purdue quarterback, kind of the same thing. He redshirted. It's like signing a high school kid. So, I think we just have to almost look totally differently at how roster management looks, at how we evaluate a portal ad, because I do think portal ads, they're not all created equally. You've got productive FCS players that are moving up. You have guys who maybe have gotten pushed out at bigger programs that have recruiting pedigrees. You've got one and dones. You have guys with 4 years still left, maybe, who redshirted. So it's all so fluid. And takes so much context, I think, to start having these conversations. But I think, generally speaking, I look at those offensive spots that I mentioned, tight end and running back, is probably two where Nebraska's been pretty quiet, and I think that says a lot about what they feel about what they already have. Evan,
hang on. I got another minute on the other side. Can you hang real quick?
Sure.
All right.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
He is kind enough to give us some overtime. It's Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald. The billable hours are very real. Evan, thank you much, bud, for giving us some extra time. I wanted to ask you about the kid that was at Arizona, University of Arizona, the defensive back Nebraska's in on. Believe me, I had there he is, Marquise Groves Killebrew. Started at A&M, went to Arizona, now possibly some links with Nebraska. How do you feel about the Husker secondary? They got a boatload of kids in a soon-to-be whittled down 105-man roster limit. What sticks out about Killebrew, if anything?
It's been, as far as I can tell, it's been pretty quiet since he came through. There could be many reasons for that. Obviously, sometimes guys come in and decide to go elsewhere. Other times, the school sees them and says, hey, maybe it just wouldn't be a great fit. Mm-hmm. But I do think, Nebraska has addressed a lot of its secondary depth already in the portal. I mean, you talk about Justin Rhett, who's come in, Dasan McCullough, who's, I guess, technically a linebacker, but sort of fits that potential nickel sort of role that Isaac Gifford had. He's somebody I think could be a quick playmaker. Andrew Marshall, who's coming in, the defensive back from Idaho, who's also a return man. That's somebody who you figure is going to be a pretty, dynamic contender for playing time. And then they added, Jameer Khan over the weekend as well, FCS corner, who was pretty productive at the lower level. So that's already a lot of bodies in addition to Sear Wright, in addition to, Marquise Buford and some of the other guys that have had some significant snaps for Nebraska. So, and not to say that maybe Nebraska is totally out on Groves Killebrew at this point, but it does seem to me that that's been a position they've addressed pretty well in the portal. The other one I'd be looking at still is TJ Lindsey, the defensive lineman from Auburn. He's down to Purdue, SMU, and Nebraska. You imagine he'll probably have a decision coming up. And then, as we mentioned, Pete on the offensive line. That's sort of the group of guys that they're in on at the moment. And then I always just think it's good to remind people, like, even though the portal is closed, sort of that next deadline that Nebraska is operating in and other schools on their own timelines is when their academic semesters start. So I think it's the 21st maybe for Nebraska. So they still got a couple good weeks of being able to bring in players, sort of assessing what those needs are, who's available in the portal. And so things will really start settling down after this semester begins in Lincoln in a few weeks.
Evan, last thought here as we look ahead to spring. If the roster is what it is today, and that includes a guy like Elijah Pritchett, who is committed but not necessarily signed, what's the biggest position of need as you see it right now?
If it stopped right at this moment, I would still say you probably need one more tackle to feel good about your situation. They probably wouldn't turn away a little defensive line depth, especially considering what they lost in the portal. And then, maybe you start looking at a running back possibly. Maybe that's a competition you let play out in the spring, and you see if you really have a group of dudes the way that maybe it seems that they do, and if not, like, that's a position that you can bring somebody in April or May, and that position is just inherently one where you can come in and make plays quicker than you could at a lot of other spots. So I think generally they've done a really good job. I mean, you just 15 portal additions, a lot of them proven contributors. They're pretty high in some of the national rankings that are out there, right at or near the top in the Big Ten. So I think you got to commend them for their efforts at this point. There's really not a lot of glaring needs, just maybe some of the few that I pointed out there. But I think ultimately the total additions might end up being close to 20, which a year ago Nebraska wasn't nearly this active. So I think it speaks to a lot of how things have changed, and also just what their sense of urgency has been in trying to improve for Matt Rule's third season.
Elijah lied to you. What's your feel on special teams announcement? What do you think happens? Does Nebraska promote within? There's some obvious local names that have been a part of the Big Red history that are out there. It's also a coordinator job at Nebraska, and that is not going to be unnoticed. And I know we still have, feels like another stretch after this college football playoff semi before the old convention gets roaring after the championship game. So I know the timelines there. But I don't know. You're not far from winter conditioning either, Evan, to get things moving.
Yeah, I don't think it's a position or a job that you want to rush into for sure. And even though Ed Foley's being reassigned, like he's still with the staff. Like if he needed to work with it, he could. And they have other coaches who can handle some of the stuff going on behind the scenes now. Sure, they could certainly promote from within, and they feel like they have a lot of young coaches there. They could go get maybe a more of a known name from a power school. My hunch, just based on sort of rules track record, is maybe they go out and find a younger coach who's done a good job as a special teams guy somewhere else, maybe as an assistant in the NFL, maybe as a smaller school guy who's gotten something done. That seems to kind of jive with what Rule has done before, what he's looking to bring in. And I just keep going back to this idea that like special teams is something where that culture is set by the head coach all the way back to Frank Beamerball at Virginia Tech and what Iowa has done and some other schools. Like you can kind of name some of those schools where it has been a priority to play on special teams, and I think Nebraska is still trying to figure that out. So Matt Rule would tell you that that's on him to set that tone, and I would imagine he's going to find somebody who's very motivated, detail-oriented, to come in and help fix some of the woes that have really been plaguing Nebraska for a long time now.
Evan Bland with us, Omaha World Herald, at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter, omaha.com, and the Pick 6 Preview Pod. Check that out with Evan on it and the crew from the World Herald. Evan, you take care, bud. Thanks for the extra time today. Awesome info as always, man.
Yep, thanks, guys. We'll see you.
All right, buddy. There he is, Evan Bland with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, at Jock Doc on the way. So let's talk offensive line. We kind of waded into that pool yesterday. I want to follow up with it and just say this, good on Nebraska if they can lock in Pete, if they can get the signature from Pritchett, because you've got a commitment but not a signature, right, Elijah?
Well, that's, I think...
Same thing?
Close enough.
So it's safe?
I'd say it's safe, yes.
Okay. There's not going to be a 12th hour swoop in. Here's $1.5 million to play somewhere else next year.
That could always happen. I would worry about it with other players as opposed to Pritchett, where Pritchett definitely had his suitors, but I think Nebraska made a competitive offer worth his while.
I think that's been a demand by the head ball coach, and it's been met.
Yeah, the commit to sign is a case-by-case basis. I'm not worried about Pritchett. I think that's a foregone conclusion.
So, good for Nebraska fans there. But here's what I think you could, if you're looking towards what's your offensive line room going to look like, who are your candidates, we laid out the guys that saw snaps, what you're trying to replace. If I'm Nebraska, I need to talk Teddy P and Turner into coming back. Not that they're not in already, but if there's any doubt, I want them both on the roster. Okay, I want them both on the roster. I want them to see if they can go win the jobs again. In worst case, get paid to be an experienced backup for me on the line of scrimmage. Maybe that's different in a good way for you if you're Nebraska, where there's a lot of schools out there that have a loaded offensive line room. How many of them have an offensive line room with stacks of starts or years of experience? Experience counts. Experience matters. So first and foremost, go make sure Teddy and Turner come back. Okay?
There is the big
You've
question mark with health.
You've got a culture, too, in the room.
There's a big question mark with health with those two guys, though. Do they want to be back is another question you have to have. If they're willing, yes, bring them back. Pay them whatever it takes to bring them back if they're willing to play more college football. I think the question with both of them is, do they want to play more college football? And we'll see that. But neither of those guys are guys that you pencil in as starters as it stands right now. And that's kind of the...
But they have.
That's kind of the question mark. If they're willing to play more college football, you'd like to have them back. If they're not willing to, you say, good luck in your next endeavors. So that's right with those two guys, because as you pencil it in right now, your starters, as I'm penciling it in, is Gatula at left tackle. I think he showed you enough last year to think that he's going to make another jump this offseason and be a solid player for you at left tackle. I think they like what they have with Evans at guard. Could they potentially move him to center? Sure. We've talked about the value.
Keep him at guard, let him kill people, and let me see sledge work.
We've talked about the value of pulling. You tend to get more chances to pull at guard. That being said, a creative offensive mind like Holgerson, if you do move Evans to center, can find a way to have him pull. I know Juergens occasionally pulls for the Eagles, which they have to get creative in order to do that, but they like his ability to get out in space and block. So you can do that, though guard is traditionally a pulling position. I think Evans is your left guard. Center is a little bit up in the air, but considering they're not going after guys, I think they feel good about what they have waiting in the wings, whether that be Evans or whether that be
or
a guy
you're just being patient till spring. You don't want to wait till spring to figure out who your starting center is going to be.
If you feel like bad about what you have in the room, then yes. If you feel all right, you see what you have in spring, and if you have to go back after spring, then you do. But I think they probably feel good about what they have waiting in the wings at center. You have Letovsky at right guard, and now you have Elijah Pritchett at right tackle. That's how I'd pencil in the starting lineup. Pritchett's probably the biggest question mark, along with where does Evans slot in. But I think you right now feel good about what you have along your offensive line.
Kobe in the stream seems to think that Gunner will miss the spring. We don't have any official injury updates. But what you do want on the offensive line is guys that are talented and capable, first of all. If Gunner's dinged, get healthy, but bring me Teddy and Turner. Go get me Elijah from Alabama. Go get me Pete from New Mexico State. That way I've got a guy in Elijah here that's played left and right.
I like how you had to clarify Elijah from Bama to make sure nobody thought it was Elijah from Lincoln. Go get me Elijah from Bama, not you, Elijah.
Elijah Pritchett from Bama, so I can have him as a swing tackle. And you just run with it. Get me experienced dudes that are too deep in this portal era. We'll get a Jock Doc thought on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Dr. Brandon Seifert back with us for 2025. A Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon, how you doing? Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year, guys. We're doing great. How about you guys?
We are good. 'Tis the season for all sorts of portal movement, and you have that NFL combine on the horizon. I know it's a ways away, but guys are declaring for the draft or they're out of eligibility, and they're off to the various training centers to get right for not only pro day, but also the combine, and then that draft weekend. Dr. Brandon, you've been able to kind of have a look-see as to what teams are interested in and also what teams are concerned about, because you've got a lot of common injuries that you get identified not only at the combine, but there is baggage from a physical standpoint the guys do bring front and center, don't they, when it comes to their NFL evaluation?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. It really is a fascinating topic. How do you evaluate players? And obviously, there's a lot of different variables there. They've got the Wonderlic testing and other kind of mental testing and a variety of things to look at, where they played, all those kinds of things. And obviously, there's the medical part of it. And there's always that big debate, which of those factors is most important. I'm biased because I'm on the medical side, but, I would submit that I think the medical side is probably one of the most important parts, just in terms of that history, that background of injuries does have a pretty high predictive value in terms of how valuable are you to your team, how long you're going to be in the league, what kind of time or minutes are you going to play, what kind of role are you going to play for your team. So I think those things are really important. I do have kind of a unique perspective about that, as I've dealt a lot with these high-level professional athletes and their grading and these systems, and have been involved with a lot of docs who've been involved in that process. And it really is, kind of a fascinating process. It's definitely evolved significantly over the last 10 years, especially just as our research and data on our surgical procedures and their outcomes and the rehab, and as you've seen all that kind of really come to the pinnacle, where I think we're really at an amazing level right now in terms of what we can do from a sports medicine perspective to get athletes back. Now we have some good years of data about, okay, what's it look like to be, certain levels of collegiate athletics and move on to the professional ranks, and then be able to make some determinations about which of these injuries, do have some predictive value in terms of player investment and playing abilities down the road. Some of the studies that are out there, you have looked at what specific injuries per specific positions will cause teams to draft a player kind of lower. Just kind of the basics of this. So as they're evaluating these players at the NFL Combine, obviously they have all these other different kind of tests and meetings they have with a variety of people, but focusing specifically on the medical side of it, essentially what you do is you come in, you have all your medical records with you, MRIs, X-rays, CT scans, you name it, all the imaging, you've got all your doctor records of basically injuries you've had, visits to the athletic training room, all the stuff that's available. And then you come into a room, and then the specialist will, doctors, providers, athletic trainers will review those records, and you'll kind of get this initial assessment by one of these team physicians that looks at you, examines you, reads through all these records, and then kind of forms an assessment and a summary of what that player's kind of history looks like. And then you take all that and the player, and you go into another room, and then there's a bunch of other physicians and athletic trainers and people involved with different teams, and they hear the summary, and then they can answer or ask questions based upon that summary. They can actually come up and examine the player themselves. Obviously, there's a lot of pointed questions about that particular injury. And then once they finish that, then all those people sitting in that room will essentially give that athlete a grade that, again, the teams will use as kind of an assessment.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here at Jock Doc Wednesday on Hail Varsity Radio, talking the pre-draft process and some injury concerns that guys may be dealing with, what it means. And Dr. Brandon, the guy that I think of, at least in Husker memory, that really fell down the draft boards because of injury, at least here in the past couple of years, is JoJo Domann, where we all saw what he did at Nebraska. Fantastic athlete with his frame, was all over the field making plays defensively, but a couple of knee injuries during his time in college really sunk him down the draft boards, ended up being an undrafted free agent guy, and then as recently as this year was waived by the Titans after suffering another injury. And Dr. Brandon, I want to get your thoughts with that in mind, how JoJo's career seemingly has ended in the NFL because of another injury. Which injuries do you think are most predictive of potential repeat injuries or other issues popping up in an NFL career?
Yeah, great question. Statistically, if you look at the data and studies that are out there, there's kind of two big ones that are there. It's more like position-based. One is, what really will knock somebody down the draft board pretty significantly is if you're a defensive player, in particular defensive lineman, and you've had a shoulder injury, whether it be surgical versus even a not surgical type of shoulder injury, but structural damage confirmed by MRI, that will actually knock you way down the draft board. On the flip side, if you're an offensive lineman, kind of similar deal. If you've had a history of these shoulder injuries, you can get knocked down the draft board, usually not as much as the defensive side, but then on the offensive line side, if you've had a significant structural knee injury in the past, that tends to knock you down the draft board over there. And those are kind of the most prevalent ones that are out there in terms of, where do they give you that point score, knocking down the draft board. Having an ACL injury does unfortunately kind of knock you down the draft board a little bit. Other things that really kind of get you high on the radar are somebody who's had a pretty significant meniscus injury, and also somebody's had a fairly significant cartilage injury to their knee. Those are the kinds of things, unfortunately, that become lingering. We've talked about with other injuries here before that definitely kind of knock you down the draft board. Those would be kind of some really kind of mainstream ones that are out there. It's kind of fascinating as you look at some of these studies that are there. Obviously, the more injuries you've had in college, the less, time you'll have as an NFL career. All that stuff's been proven, and it makes sense logically. But one thing that is interesting as you look through the data and the studies on this is usually we'll see in college, you'll see about 9 significant structural injuries per 1,000 football players. So kind of interesting to think about number of football players and those injuries that happen. I thought maybe that number might be a bit higher than that, but that's kind of the prevailing number that's out there.
Dr. Brandon, you look at the formula that's put together here for the different position groups, and it's just super integral specific, and it's really phenomenal, this data that we've been shared with by you, and from just how it's looked at, not only by the different position groups, but just the predictive part, right? Like you have X injury if you're a defensive back. Here's the data that backs up performance or can help at least predict what type of success or lack of success you may have.
Yeah, no, it really is. You're seeing the, specific injuries that, are more specific to, positions, whether it be like a quarterback, obviously more prone to shoulder injuries, or, defensive linemen more prone to shoulder injuries as well. Linebackers more prone to like hand fractures. Defensive backs more prone to ankle injuries like running backs are. And then, how does that predict, future, playing time and career in the NFL? All that stuff, that's quite fascinating.
It's good. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. A Jock Doc Wednesday as we talk upcoming draft status, NFL Combine, and the medical side of the evaluation when it comes to taking stock in a player, what's going to help you rise, what may cause you to fall on the draft board. Dr. Brandon, we'll dive into some more NFL draft down the road. Always appreciate your time and insight.
Okay, fellas, you guys take care.
Good to spend time with Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Pretty incredible info, quite honestly, that you comb through when grading out your positions and your injuries. We'll wind down a Wednesday next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you one final time on a Wednesday. Big thanks to Mike Babcock and Evan Bland and Dr. Brandon. Make sure you find Hail Varsity Radio and go ahead and search Hail Varsity Radio, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for the podcast. Download, give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. Appreciate the listenership as always. Hail Varsity YouTube, like and subscribe there. Both ways to take us with on your timeline, 489-1240. 489-1240. To-do list says the following: cough drops.
Big.
Get cough drops. And we'll have home and away versions of said cough drops. So set and ready to go for that. Tomorrow's show, we'll check in with Gary Barnett. Barney back with us. Excited to talk with him. College football preview and playoff. Also, portal thoughts, see if Nebraska has any more additions with folks shopping around, making their way, taking their visits. So that'll be on the docket. Also, Brandon Vogel back with us. Vogues will check in from Counter Read. And what is exciting, Danny Burke's Best Bets. Full slate of college football and the NFL tomorrow night, Notre Dame, Penn State. Then you've got Texas and Ohio State Friday. Reminder to get buckled up. Driving is a full-time job. Phones, food, and friends need your attention when you're not driving. Stop the distractions. Just drive. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. My wife was able to wrestle Mr. Snuggles, the Bernedoodle. Sterling had his birthday yesterday, and she was able to wrangle him, get him a birthday hat, and then taunt him with a treat over his nose so she could take photos.
Who got better birthday presents this year, you or Sterling?
He was my birthday gift.
I'm
you
well
forgot.
Aware. No, I'm well aware.
Oh.
That's why I'm wondering.
No, he's kind of a cool dude. He's all right. He's got these mean green eyes like Scott Farkas from A Christmas Story.
That's the way he's a cool dude.
No, he's all right. I mean, for him to get the worst haircut in America and then get you-know-what chopped off in the same week and not murder his entire family, I think he's an all right guy.
On that note, how about the weekend of football we've got coming up here?
Dude, it's going to be good.
College football playoff Thursday, college football playoff Friday.
Wild card.
Super wild card weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night too, yeah?
No, I know.
As my Broncos back in the postseason. Saturday it's Steelers and Ravens. The Texans are also battling it out.
They have kind of just fallen off. They were really nice looking early. Texans were.
And there's always the sophomore slump, if you will, for a quarterback. Stroud, I don't think it was all his fault.
No.
The team around him this year was not as good as the team last year.
Well, I think
Stephon Diggs getting hurt really hurt them as well.
Diggs getting hurt was not good. And then Mixon. When they had Mixon to run the football, they were putting up a ton of points on people. And Mixon, it's funny, you take Mixon out of Cincinnati, not close to being the same offense or balance. You take Mixon, because he had an ankle injury to start the year, and then he had an issue kind of midway point, and that's where they literally limped into the playoffs. So, no, I hope we see some great football. I think we will. I'm really intrigued by Green Bay and Philly.
Oh, that's going to be a good game, too. My roommate's a big Packers fan. While we're talking about the Texans, though, national media's not talking about it. Who had better stats this year between Bo Nix and C.J. Stroud? It's Bo Nix.
Yes, it was. We'll talk tomorrow at 4. Thanks.